We don't say, oh, you're coming here as a single individual, so we're going to reduce your salary because you don't have a family. And so if you look at the chart for Wayne County, in fact, an adult with a child, they're looking at almost close to $20 an hour. And most of the employees we have at the college are, in fact, members of families. Benefits are good. The college has done a nice job. It's been generous on that. The issue is you can't pay your rent with benefits. So you can't buy food with benefits. At the end of the month, I can't go to the grocery store and say, give me an extra $200 worth of groceries because I have a college benefit I'm going to cash in 10 years down the road. It just doesn't work that way. So the issue is providing the income that individuals need to live in a way that is dignified. And I think any of us who have spent much time with our hourly workers on this campus know that some of them are doing quite well, and some of them have stories that are almost impossible for us to believe in terms of the way they have to live their lives based on the salary that they are being given. And I think that becomes the critical issue. And so in terms of a moral issue, finances are in fact moral issues. Finances are not about finances, they're about moral priorities. And so to what do we give a priority? And so I want to go back and pick up Linda's point that if we are a community that is talking about training responsible global leaders, we can't raise responsible global leaders in an environment where the people on the top benefit through keeping the wages and conditions of those on the bottom low income. It's not the kind of world we want to live in. It's not the kind of leaders that we want to raise. Again, just calm and quiet.
Closest.
Oh, sorry. Okay. This is actually a question about what you said because I'm not an economist. You said that it would actually be more like 6% of the budget because of salary compression. Could you just explain that a little more?
If you suddenly decide to raise some salaries, then you're going to create kind of inequality with the people who are now lower in salary relative to that. So you have to look across the whole system and figure out, okay, so suppose we've had 20 years seniority, and now we decide that the person, and those two lowest paid workers have been in college for about a year. So suppose we say we're going to look at them and we're just going to raise their salaries, then if you've had quite a bit of seniority or you're in a more senior position, that's not going to look very equitable to you. So in order to have equitable compensation, you have to kind of figure out the whole system, not just one subset of the system. So that's one thing that would add cost, and then the other is the 35% of benefits, which you can't take to the grocery store, but you also aren't paying at the doctor's.
So this is possibly something that you wouldn't feel comfortable answering right now, but I feel very sure that you wouldn't, but I'm going to ask you. So if it was the case that the people who are being paid more came to you and said, no, we won't feel upset about this, we really think this is fine, do you think that this would make it a more pragmatic cause or a more pragmatic solution to you?
I can answer that, but you won't appreciate the answer. I don't see that happening. Chuck has very generously and very often offered to cut his salary. I am not aware of anyone else at the college who has done that. So just realistically speaking, I would doubt that that scenario would transpire. If it did, great.
Can I ask a clarifying question, just in terms of the 35% benefits, right? So I work in admissions. Is the tuition that you're talking about to Worcester or to any higher education?
It can be, it certainly is at Worcester, and it can also be taken at other colleges. So for example, we have a staff member who has 2 children in other colleges, and that tuition benefit this year is amounting for that person to $70,000.
Now, my understanding, because I work in admissions, if the student, if a family member's student applies and is not accepted, is there then a $70,000 compensation that is given to the staff member?
No, it depends on what the tuition would be where they are going.
So they don't get into the college, what would happen then?
The tuition would depend on where they are going.
Terry.
Thank you, Colin. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chadwick Smith, a junior president of the Black Students Association. My question is for the panel, or for anybody in the room. As people of privilege, how do we talk about this issue without being demeaning to people who live this realistically? Because some of us don't live this realistically, so we can talk about it, but we don't live it. So, yeah, how do we talk about this issue and not demean the people who actually experience this on a real level?
I think it's really difficult to have privilege and talk about these issues because at some point you have to put your money where your mouth is, and you have to be willing to you know, either it's just a conversation, it's an academic conversation, or you're willing to do something. And I think this community really has to ask itself what it is willing to do. So, for example, are us as higher paid faculty members and staff willing to take a pay cut? I don't think that's, we have to go there, but you know, if the answer comes back, we've looked at all the data and that's what we have to do, then that's what we have to do. Are you willing to pay more to go to this school? Are you willing to you know, receive less in financial aid? I think those are all sort of very, very important questions that, you know, you need to sort of answer, and you need to be willing to act. Otherwise it's just a conversation and you just sound like a privileged person and you're going to eventually just sort of go back, yeah. I think it's really difficult. I've lived in this community for 12 years and I have enormous privilege and I'm very lucky to live where I live. I was talking to some of my students the other day. We were looking at income distribution in Worcester. How did a guy that grew up in the second poorest country in the world end up living here? It's like amazing. So I think, you know, to answer your question, I think it's very, very difficult. You have to be very, you know, cautious about what it is that you're saying. And you have to be willing to put your money where your mouth is.
Especially in the context of tonight's panel, I think one way to sort of treat people who would benefit from this policy is to actually get their voice out on panels like this. But again, that takes a sense of safe community where people feel like they're being supported. And the way the conversation is already sort of framed, there isn't an underlying sense of community. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, it's a zero-sum game. It's like if the bottom comes up, I have to lose something. And I think that's not we don't have to frame it that way. You can frame it as a sense of like an obligation and a sense of duty to each other, and then somebody may not be as bothered by wage compression, right? If somebody tells their story, you know, I'm an employee, I have a family of 3, and I have these obligations, and it's tough. That may not be as big a deal for somebody who's been here 20 years, right? Because those folks do contribute generously when we have crises. We've had plenty of examples of that where people will very generously, you know, help out. And again, even at the top, you know, the faculty, who we are privileged, and you know, it doesn't have to be framed as a matter of like losing something. It's just slowing down our, you know, we get cost of living, we get raises, we get, you know, we made progress under President Cuomo's administration. We're all thankful for that. But that could be slowed down, right, so that the bottom could catch up. I mean, and I think if you frame it in a sense that, you know, we're all kind of in this together, and don't play those this employee versus this staff versus faculty, administrators, even administrators, sorry, Chuck, administrators versus faculty and staff. I mean, don't frame it that way. We can make pretty quick progress and not really, treat people with, you can treat people with respect. And the other, I'll stop. But I think as an institution with a mission, we're unlike a lot of other institutions in the area, in this local community. I mean, we have a mission. And to me, in my mind, that we're expected to lead, right? We have lots of employers in the community, and we should be sort of at the front end of that, right? About progressive policies, about treating our employees and staff well. And this is a pragmatic argument. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure for employees in this community. With new companies are coming in, Gojo and Luke's expanding, and we, I'm not really in favor of approaching it just this way, but as a pragmatic principle, right? We're going to have to treat people well, right? To get quality employees and to keep them here. So there's lots of reasons to go ahead, but I would just say, like, when we frame it, we should always think about, this is a community kind of issue. It's not staff versus faculty.
So when we talk about privilege, one of the things I think that makes students really powerful, and is one of the reasons I think we don't have a lot of staff here, is this question of access. Whose voice gets heard and who gets to speak? So when Chad asked the question, like, how do we have this conversation and not have it a hand up, but a hand out, that kind of thing, I would also say this voice question is critical. Listen to these folks. Okay, we also have lots and lots of stories about folks who might be all right financially, but who feel very disrespected on this campus. And some of you don't go to Mom's after midnight for good reason, and some people have to go to Mom's after midnight because that's their job. Some people clean those windows out there all the time, every day, all day, and then watch us go through with our hands on the window over and over again. Or the other night, somebody thought it would be great to kiss the window back there. I don't know why, but there were lots of lip marks on it. And that was work that some of these folks had to do. So I do think, when you're talking about how do we do this and not in a privileged way, is that we begin also by having conversations with folks, by hearing their stories, by asking them, what would you do? Because that's really where our creativity will come from as we address these thorny issues that President Nugent is talking about. It isn't an easy, quick answer. We have a lot of conversation. We have a lot of folks who may be in that category that if they got an increase would, in the category of pay where they could get an increase, who are saying, don't even go near this, because they're being told that means they'll lose their job. So there need to be guarantees for safety for that conversation to actually happen. And it's not, it's something that I think students and faculty can take a lead on, because the rest of us who are at will, we can encourage, we can come along as allies, but it does mean that there is a whole population on this campus who literally, if one of you decided to make a major complaint against them, I guess we saw it at Mizzou with presidents, but who, if they offend you, because you are our main customers, could lose their job. So I have had conversations with folks who, I'm like, can't we have a conversation with the students about the way they leave, blah, 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 in this building? No. Because the people who have to do the cleaning up aren't sure they could risk that conversation. So I think part of it really is that relationship building. Helping the folks see you as people. Some people don't see students as people. And see them as people. And as we humanize this whole community, I don't think it will be so much about dollars as it will be about how can we be a creative community? Can we imagine and put into practice? Can we walk alongside the administration who has to figure out all those tough questions, right? In a way that we can create some of that utopian kind of thing that you learn about in Dr. Tierney's FYS. We won't be a utopia, right? But we know our world, your world, that you have to live in a lot longer than I do, is not sustainable with infinite growth. Dr. Kammerer says there's one thing that's infinite growth, and it's called cancer. Otherwise, the question, I think, is how much is enough? Not just for the bottom, but for the top. We can't have endless wage expansion. Somewhere along there's a correction, and can we do that intentionally and with principles? Or will we just wait till the shoe falls? Now, I think it's a better leadership and citizenship to do something intentional.
I just want to thank Professor Tierney for your comment on, like you were saying, to not make this a battle between two different people. Because I think that's sometimes what, even right now, what's going on with the Syrian refugees. And I saw a post on Facebook that said, like, Obama wants to bring Syrian refugees, but we have homeless veterans. And I'm like, we can actually help both at the same time. And I know Professor Kamer and Reverend Lindes, people of the cloth, Paul talks about that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against actually systems. So we don't have to frame this as a battle against other people, but against systems that exist in the world that marginalize people. So thank you for y'all's comments.
If I could make a quick comment, I think back to Chad's question and his follow-up comment. First, and this is not to get a sympathy feel, but some of us have lived the reality we're talking about. Some of us have kids and grandkids who live that reality. So it's part of my everyday world. And so I understand what it feels like from the inside, particularly through the eyes of my own children. Second thing, this is a systems issue, but systems are made up of people. And so it's people who have to decide to change systems. We don't want to make it people against people, but you need to know that at one point, about 4 or 5 years ago, the faculty voted to freeze the salaries of hourly workers for 2 years. So faculty salaries could increase by a coefficient of about 10 to 12% over the 2-year time period, while our hourly workers got no raises whatsoever. That's a people-to-people, but also a systems issue. Also, I want you to think about the fact that a living wage does not mean you go from what we have now to $15 an hour in a year. You bring it in grade-aided, and every year we have a set-aside pool for raises. And I want you to think for a minute about what raises look like. It's like, well, this year will be an equitable raise, everybody will get 2%. If you're making $600,000, 2% is $12,000 a year. If you're making $10 an hour, it's something like, what do we have here, 20 cents, that's $8 a week. And so it's really not an equitable raise when it's at a percentage raise, right? And so how does one begin to shift even the raises each year to begin to offset income inequality? So it's something that can be done on an annual basis with money that's already allocated, at least begin to make some of those kinds of corrections. It would be lovely to see this as an issue in which the community comes together at all levels to support and push the issue forward. I think that would be fantastic. I will second what Linda said. A lot of our hourly workers, because of history and other kinds of reasons, really don't feel safe speaking their minds on this campus about a whole kind of bunch of issues. Whether their fears are real or not, I don't know, but clearly the college needs to address how we create an environment of safety in which they feel they can comfortably speak.
He's right there.
Oh my god. I'm so sorry. Oh shoot, I want to itch on my computer. Okay. So I kind of wanted to reject the notion that our aim in looking at our budget should be figuring out how to scrape away with the bare minimum. So we could look at what a minimum wage is and try and navigate what does that look like in Worcester, but why are we so opposed to something better? I think we should be striving for more. I don't think it's a particularly revolutionary idea. It's being examined at a national level. So I would encourage us to be leaders in that field. I also wanted to look at, there's very little budgetary information about our school available. So as far as like checking facts, that's a little difficult because they're not out there. But just a couple things that I've found that I wanted to bring up. So our school has 36.8 million in total wages. Hourly staff earns 6.7 million of that. Of groups that exceeded their budget last year, the only two that I saw were the VP of Finance Office and the President's Office. The VP of Finance Office exceeded their budget by 10.8 million total. I would also like to point out that we're currently looking, from what I've heard, at redoing Apex and also redoing the entire science building. And for the science building, we were able to raise 40 million. So I think that we could potentially alter our budget and raise money and do what the school has done before in the interests of the workers who serve us so well. Other information that I found that was interesting. So Worcester's sustainability plan helps create a $1.9 million surplus via cuts. So different departments cut their budgets. That's something that's been done before. I think we could do it again. I know that there are plenty of expenses that we have that aren't particularly necessarily lots of faculty events, lots of parties for departments and things like that that rack up unnecessary expenses. And then also just to look at something that was addressed in a class of mine about basically the breakdown of wages if you're earning $9 an hour. So food would be an estimated $480 a month, rent would be an estimated $525, utilities an estimated $100, car payment an estimated $100, clothes an estimated $40 per month, which leaves you with very, very little to survive on aside from that. So we can talk about a minimum wage as the baseline that we should be looking at, but I don't see why that's the particular focus of our budgetary committee, and I hope that that's not moving forward. That's all. Thanks.
Can I just quickly clarify that no one is talking about a minimum wage? We're looking at the question of a living wage. A minimum wage would be several dollars less than what Worcester's currently. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm kind of like losing my thoughts on the microphone, but I had a question for you, President. But I can't think of it. Sorry. I guess, okay, no, I figured it out. Okay, so the tuition that we pay for workers, is that hourly staff as well? Or is that just like faculty, like people, like professors? Is it like everybody that works at the college? When we pay for tuition for their children, who gets that? It's everybody? Okay.
You have to have worked here 3 years every year.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention that like that's like a huge benefit, like that's unbelievable considering how much like we pay. But if you're getting paid at or like anywhere near the poverty line, it doesn't even matter if you're like slightly above it, like that's still not enough money to live off of. And like I know that's very close to my heart, like I know that. So it's not enough to live on, even if you're above it by a little bit. But like if you are at that level, you don't have the same opportunities to even get to college. A lot of people do have. So, like, you don't have SAT tutors, you don't get tutors or anything. Like, you're marginalized anyway. Like, the chances of those kids being able to get into college are already so much lower. And then if they're, like, shooting really high, like, when they look at their FAFSA and they see, like, a lot of institutions, like, they say they don't, but they do, will look and see how much money your family makes, and they see that, and they see, like, oh, wow, we have to pay all this stuff, we don't want to take you even less than like you already do, and you already have so many odds stacked against you. So I don't understand, like I understand it's a huge benefit, but if they're not making enough to provide for their family, provide for their children, and give them a quality education and give them what they need outside of the education, if they're worried about where they're going to get their next meal because mom and dad are working 2 jobs each and are exhausted, and mom and dad don't have enough time to put into them outside of work, or when they get home from school and they're alone for like 6 hours because they're working late nights, like they're already so stacked against them. Like I feel like it doesn't even matter if we have the tuition that we're paying for them, because the chances of these kids being able to like utilize that are so low because they're living in poverty. So I just wanted to like put that out there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as the president. Like I understand it's a huge benefit, like I don't want to like seem like I don't, but when these people are not making enough to live decently, the chances of them actually doing that are even lower.
Yeah, no, your point is really well taken. I'm a first-generation kid. I always worked 3 jobs at college and sent money home. So I get where you're coming from. And you're right, there are probably, unfortunately, less opportunities. That's not to say that wonderful things don't happen. I haven't been at Worcester long enough to know a lot of personal stories, but I know personal stories from Kenyon, where, for example, the kids of groundkeepers went to great universities. One of them that I'm aware of has now been an admissions officer at Stanford and Princeton. I mean, it's a totally different life than what his parents were able to have. And I know that happens at Worcester too. But your point is very well taken. In this country, now public school ought to suffice for enabling you to go to a good college and be prepared. In a lot of cases now that's not the case. So you're right. I don't know how much more we can do to reach into the schools. I would like to be doing more of that from Worcester. So it's a great benefit. I think a number of people get to take advantage of it. Some probably do not.
Yeah, it's just like if we don't increase the wage that we're giving them, then I feel like it's just wasted in a way. So,
Yeah, but we have to, okay,
yes.
so we have to look at what wages are in our community. So for example, as someone mentioned, we're going to have new employers in our community. Gojo, several large new employers are coming in. I want to look at what those wages are, and are we competitive? Are we paying what's appropriate in this community? Those are really, we can talk about it in an abstract way, like let's be sure that everyone has a wage to support a family of 5. But I want to know what's actually viable in this community. What do people need? And we should be there. And Chuck is absolutely right. If it takes us, if we need to phase that in over 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is, we do that. But I want to be talking about real, real wages, real numbers, not an abstract number that we plucked out of the sky. So that's why the committee that's looking at this is trying to garner that information. What's happening in our community, what do you need in our community, and how can we meet those needs?
I think Professor Molodina has something to say.
I think
I think in this discussion we're confusing a lot of things. We're confusing the why with the how a little bit, perhaps. So I want to ask the first question, the why, okay? And we're a not-for-profit. So I teach this class called Social Entrepreneurship, where we look at and we work with not-for-profits, and so I think I know a little bit about this. So the thing that motivates, the thing that gives the raison d'être for a not-for-profit is its mission. So one really interesting thing that one needs to look at then is what is the mission of our organization? The object of our mission, if you analyze it, is really, or the people that we're trying to influence are the students, they're you guys. So the mission actually doesn't say much about us, the workers. And so there really kind of isn't anything there that we can go on. Although it's sort of a matter of interpretation because, as Linda says, look at the start, the headline, it says, our goal, our collective endeavor, alumni, faculty, staff, is to train leaders of character and influence to solve problems in the global community. So that's a pretty lofty mission, right? And so how does one train leaders? So I can't train you to be an economist if I'm not an economist. Right? Okay. So we can't train leaders if we are not leaders. So there's some data. The 2 largest employers in this area are, anyone know? Luke? Smuckers. Who's the third?
College of Wooster.
College of Wooster. And there's some conflicting data. So if you look at the Wayne County Economic Development Council's data, where I looked at the ranking, we have let me get this right. We have 850 employees. If you look at our Form 990 for 2013, we have 2,432 employees. So I don't know which one's right. We need to figure this out. We need data can tell us. But if we look at the Wayne County Economic Development Council's website, they probably had some kind of a standardized procedure, so I'm assuming it's right. Okay, we are the third largest employer. Bueller's Worcester Community Hospital are the two other large employers at 775 and 700 respectively. So I think one of the things to be thinking about is that when we talk about the question of why, our mission tells us why. And the why should be very clear, at least it's clear in my mind. So then the question comes to what, and we can fight about that, 15, 11, 10, you know, we can have a discussion about that. As an interesting aside, I've been talking a lot about, I talked to the folks in the living wage discussion, I said, you know, what we need actually a salary compensation policy at Worcester, and we need one that's sort of across the board. And one of the things that I found by going on the Worcester Wiki was we do have a salary compensation policy for staff. I don't know if it's outdated, but I found it. It was on the wiki. Yeah, it's there. Hopefully it doesn't disappear. And in that salary compensation policy, I think we worked with some folks to figure that out a few years back or something like that. There is a word there that says equity, and what equity means in that context, if you interrogate it very carefully, is that we want to make sure that for people that do the same work, they're paid in a manner that's equitable. Okay? So equity really just means that you do not want to pay someone, in that context, you do not want to pay someone that's just sort of started, like President Nugent said, right? More than you paid someone that's been here for like 10 years doing the same work. Okay? What's really interesting to me, and of course I can do this because I am an academic, is we apply the equity principle this way. We're not applying the equity principle the other way. So we have a bit of an inconsistency so we need to kind of think about our philosophy a little bit. So I think we need to interrogate our mission a little bit. I think we need to interrogate our policies a little bit and think about what they actually mean and come to some agreement as a community. And this has to be done in a manner that's inclusive. And I think that's going to be really hard at Worcester given the contours of the discussion that we've been talking about. But I do think that given our position in the community, we are an economic engine and we are a leader, whether we like it or not. And so our mission, at least my reading of it, calls us to do something about it. The how, that's just business. It's solvable.